Rates of dementia, one of the worst illnesses out there, are absolutely soaring right now. In fact, by some estimates, rates could double within the next 20 years. And that's not necessarily because people are getting older. There are other risk factors involved. And a new study sheds some fascinating light on 3 major risk factors and 3 things that people can be super focused on if their goal is to avoid cognitive decline. So we are going to unpack this study, and for anybody who enjoys our discussions, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button. Who else to get us started but Dr. Ben to unpack this study and what everyone can learn from it? So this was a pretty large study. It involved about 12,000 patients. They followed them for approximately 26 years, patients aged 40 to 65 years old. And they looked at 3 major risk factors. Well, they looked at a lot, but 3 risk factors emerged as having a correlation with the development of dementia. Those were high blood pressure, smoking, and diabetes. And what did they find? They found that people that did not have any of these conditions, they did not smoke, they did not have high blood pressure for the vast majority of their time, and they did not have diabetes. They lived 13 years longer without dementia. So that's a pretty big deal. So it's looking like those 3 risk factors are the major contributors. Well, thank you, Dr. Ben. And that is really telling. And it's more than simply looking at these 3 conditions, which we will get at. So what you said, Dr. Ben, was having uncontrolled blood pressure, smoking, and diabetes, and this may be more than what you think, and we'll talk about that, but let's talk about each risk factor one by one. To high blood pressure. Obviously, we spend a lot of time talking about the fact that in some people blood pressure is overtreated, but by the same token, many people are walking around with very high blood pressure, and the root cause is often metabolic dysfunction and insulin resistance. Dr. Ben, what do you think about blood pressure as a risk factor for development of dementia, and does it make sense to you? Well, we know high blood pressure, very high blood pressure is a problem. It can cause a lot of conditions to emerge later in life. It can be very dangerous, and yes, it does appear it is having some effect on the development of dementia. Now, we talk about blood pressure a lot on this channel, and the reason is because when someone develops high blood pressure, most physicians, most doctors, the medical establishment immediately wants to throw you on a bunch of medications without trying to help you figure out why do you have blood pressure and how do we lower it naturally. If you can take a look at your body and your life and kind of go, hey, I'm doing this poorly, I'm very overweight, I'm eating very, very poorly, and we can work on those things. We can become physically active. We can work on the diet effectively. There's a good chance we can treat blood pressure without having to put you on a bunch of medications. Exactly. Yeah. So you nailed it there. Lifestyle is a major driver of high blood pressure. Nutrition, as you mentioned, exercise, sleep, stress, there's so much that goes into it, and this would be a whole different discussion. But for our viewers right now, if you're worried about hypertension as a risk factor for dementia, it makes perfect sense. If your blood pressure is too high, it's going to damage those blood vessels in your brain. So in terms of everybody's ideal blood pressure, as we've talked about before, that is unique to you. It's ridiculous that everybody has the same goal blood pressure. Some people might start to feel dizzy if the top number is 120, and it's only recently that authorities have started to become more aggressive. But generally, as a rule, Dr. Ben, would you say if we're talking about high blood pressure being in the 150s, 160s, when it starts to get up there, that's where there could be damage, especially if there's metabolic dysfunction. And it would, especially if you're measuring it at home. I mean, don't just go on what is in the doctor's office. That's correct. And yes, that's a little too high. So if your top number's above 150, you're really starting to get into that area where we're starting to get into trouble, and you are going to develop some downstream issues very likely. Dementia, stroke, heart disease, those can all come if your blood pressure remains elevated, truly is elevated. That means it's been checked at home, it's been checked in the doctor's office. We're quite sure it's elevated. And if the bottom number is above 90, hitting around 100, somewhere like that, somewhere in the 90s, that's not great either. We'd really like to kind of see that come down a bit. You know, those are important numbers to be paying attention to. Yes, everybody is different. Some people tolerate lower blood pressures, other people don't. Some people tolerate higher blood pressures, other people don't. But as a general rule, 150 over 90 is probably too high, and we need to start talking about getting it down if you're getting into those numbers, for sure. Exactly. And I would also like to add a note as well. What I am also concerned about, especially at the extremes of age, when people in their late 70s, 80s, even 90s, what I tend to see is blood pressure dropping low and overtreated, and that's not enough blood getting to the brain. So that could also increase the risk of cognitive decline. So the bottom line is, please just keep tabs on it, know your own body, and of course follow up intensely. And you don't want your blood pressure to go up. And if metabolic dysfunction is there, the root cause should be addressed. Okay, let's talk about number 2, smoking. Now, myself and Dr. Ben might be old enough to remember the days when people used to smoke on planes. I remember being very young and being on a plane and seeing people smoking, which seems unthinkable now. The truth is, smoking has gone down drastically, hasn't it? I mean, how many people do we see nowadays who smoke? Not many. It's gone down a lot. Smoking is a significant risk factor for dementia as well as vascular disease. So, heart disease, stroke, but you really just don't see it as much as you used to. Yeah, we used to see it all the time. You would see it in restaurants. There'd be smoking areas in the airport. You would see it in stores. As a matter of fact, people used to smoke in the doctor's office, not during my time themselves on board. Absolutely. Used to happen. A lot of the older nurses I'm with tell me that doctors used to smoke on ward rounds in the hospital. Oh, absolutely. People used to smoke all the time. Now you're just not seeing it that much. We know how bad smoking is for you, and I don't think anyone could make a very good argument that smoking is good for your body or even okay for it. So it's pretty clear to me that smoking is, if you are smoking, that's your biggest risk factor right there. You have to do everything you can to stop. We know the damage it does to your body. It's not just the nicotine, the tobacco. There is so much stuff in cigarettes that snorts as toxic and carcinogenic and terrible. So if you are smoking, that's the number one thing I would work on. Ishida, yeah. And yeah, undoubtedly smoking causes vascular disease, is something that was a problem for many decades. And if we see people who smoke now, it's much more unusual. A word about marijuana, cannabis smoking, which the United States has rapidly legalized. In my view, a big, big mistake. There's nothing good that ever comes out of legalizing more drugs. But what I see now is people coming into hospital who smoke marijuana regularly, and I see a fair number of people in their 50s and 60s, and I think that that's probably going to have the same effect on blood vessels. I mean, you can argue about the tar content and nicotine content, but it's still smoke going into you. Yeah. I don't like smoke or foreign material entering the lungs. Now, the lungs have a really impressive process for eliminating foreign dust and bodies that get inside. So your lungs do a really good job of filtering the air. That being said, you can overwhelm them. And if you are constantly putting smoke into your lungs, whether it be tobacco or marijuana, you are going to do damage. Now, some people have gummies. I do. If you're going to partake in marijuana products, I would always prefer that you tried them orally as opposed to smoking, because the smoke entering your lung is an immediate problem for the lungs themselves. They just don't do well when you're putting smoke into the lungs like that. Yep. All right. So message me is don't smoke. And let's move on to number 3, which I would say is the biggest risk factor, is diabetes. But this is so much more than you think, because the criteria we have for diabetes and prediabetes, these are obviously man-made cutoffs. But the truth is that people who have diabetes have had insulin resistance for 10 years or more, and we don't check fasting insulin levels. The medical profession is not yet up to speed. I would give it another 10 years. And the medical profession will realize that you can check a fasting insulin, and it will be abnormal years before the glucose and HbA1c goes up. And that's when the fire is burning. But the larger point here is, even if we go with old criteria, I say old criteria, do you have prediabetes? Do you have diabetes? The amount of damage that elevated blood sugar does to every cell in your body, every organ in your body, there is a school of thought that dementia should be called type 3 diabetes, because there's such a huge correlation. And when you look at a diabetic and how every organ system is affected, it makes sense that high blood sugar is going to really affect the brain and cognition. And this is, I would rate it, high blood pressure is obviously up there too, but I would rate avoiding becoming insulin resistant and diabetic as your best hedge against cognitive decline and dementia. Of nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is ever guaranteed. It's all about tilting the odds in your favor. But I know that this is something you see a lot as well, Dr. Ben. Diabetes is such an awful condition. It is so pro-inflammatory. And we're talking about the damage it does to cause dementia. But if you think about it, it's probably multi-pronged. So it damages the cells themselves. It can cause damage to the neurosystem. So your peripheral nerves, your central nerves, that's your spine, your brain, it can cause damage to the blood flow vessels and inflammation in the blood vessels themselves. And Dr. Peter, our cardiologist, talks all the time about how heart disease is really an inflammatory condition of the heart tissue and of the coronary arteries. That's very true about the brain too. So you can have inflammation of the vessels that feed the brain. And one thing you'll sometimes hear doctors say is vascular dementia. And what you'll see is that the vessels that feed the brain just over time have had so much inflammation and damage that also causes a condition like dementia as well, where people have trouble with memory, cognition, and begin to deteriorate pretty dramatically. So yes, you could make a very strong argument that diabetes and uncontrolled sugar in your body is one of the worst things you can have happen, especially if it's done for years and years. That's a cumulative effect, and that damage begins to worsen as time continues. Now, the good news is you can reverse these things. Much of that damage can be reversed if you catch it early enough and start making changes. Yes. And this is why I really fear for the future when we look at the fact that diabetes has basically become normalized now in society. Oh, just take a pill, take an injection, and your sugar will come down. But you haven't dealt with the root cause. All of that inflammation is still happening. Your liver is being pounded by sugar. And this is why statistics show that we could see a doubling in dementia rates in younger people within the next 20 years. It is so very concerning, and a lot of this links back to, in fact, it all links back to metabolic dysfunction. How can you optimize metabolic health? And Dr. Ben, you said that if these figures were absent, or rather if these risk factors were absent, that people could expect to live 13 more years without cognitive decline. Is that correct? That's what the study showed. So in these people that did not have these 3 risk factors, even if they had some other risk factors, they were living 13 years longer without signs of dementia or cognitive dysfunction. That's a big deal. That is indeed a very, very big deal. So please, everybody, be very careful, especially in middle age. That's when these risks can either go in your favor or go against you. But the study result makes perfect sense. And we really wish, and we're advocating for, the medical profession to put more emphasis on metabolic dysfunction as a whole and start nipping things in the bud more quickly before they become an issue. Because a lot of the conditions we deal with now, including type 2 diabetes, were extremely rare a few years ago. In fact, it was never even heard of in children, and now it's one of the fastest growing illnesses out there. So we have a lot of work to do. This is not just about the future of everybody individually, although that's very important. Everybody wants to be well and healthy. It's also the future of the country. It's also the economic impact and the devastating family impact. And we'll finish with this. Dr. Ben, would you agree that the toll that cognitive decline and dementia exerts on families too is unbelievable? I see this every day. I've seen this all week working in the hospital this week. I'd say it's almost worse. So what happens to the family when a family member is suffering from dementia? You could make an argument is worse than what's happening to the patient themselves. I mean, it is devastating what happens to the family. There's support groups, there are all kinds of things, but in the end, it just tears family apart. It's so hard to watch. It lasts such a long time, usually where they go through years and years of these dangerous behaviors because they're so confused. They say things they would never have said to their family normally. It's an awful, awful condition. That's right. So on that note, we wish you the very best. We hope you're all working very hard on these risk factors. We know you probably are, but it's good to always be reminded. Everybody can do a bit better. You can walk a little bit extra. You can eat that extra protein. You can say no to that sugary treat that you know you don't need. It's all these small steps that add up. And we are cheering you on the whole way. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Do leave a comment down below as well. We will leave a link down below as well to the actual study result in the article. Do check out as well in the links down below our natural health and well-being store, which we are very excited to be expanding all natural well-being products based on compounds that we believe in and consume ourselves as doctors. We have personally formulated. highwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America. highwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. If you enjoyed this video, we have a sneaking suspicion you will also enjoy this video appearing on the screen right here. Take care. We will speak again very